Hi all. We again have Jarrod Kimber at our show. Like last time around, you people gave a very thumping response to it, and a lot of our members, a lot of our subscribers have been asking us that they want to know more about the book and also about the man. And because I think Gerard as a person also has been a mystery. Like very few people know about him outside of his cricket ventures. Like his personal life has been a little bit of a, I think something which he's not been very vocal about. And I also was interacting with him recently, just before the beginning of this series, and got to know a few things about him. And finally, the book is now available in the print version in India.
It is, yeah.
Yes, I was,
Hardcover and softcover.
and you must have read the reviews, amazing reviews,
Very
and
happy with the
the
reviews. Thank
rating
you to everyone.
reviews. Yeah.
Also, for those who don't know, it doesn't matter if it's Deepak's YouTube channel or my book. Even if you can't afford them, if you can't support us financially, the way to support us is by reviewing things, by leaving stars, by subscribing and all that sort of stuff.
Yes.
So if you have read the book, or even if you've stolen the book from somewhere, put a review up somewhere, because it really does help the author quite a lot.
I've bought an audio one because I'm a dyslexic, as I mentioned earlier, also.
Yeah.
So reading, like it becomes a pretty laborious task for me. But the audiobook I have started,
So
and
you're sick and tired of my voice already.
no, not exactly, because I'm pretty fond of it, to be honest. Because I see a lot of reels of yours also, like the reels that you're doing with Robbie, also some amazing insights, amazing stories, all those things, and it's really amazing because I have not seen somebody who has such a vast knowledge of cricket history and also able to add a little bit of romance in it, because you have that way of romanticizing the way cricket needs to be, I think, delivered to the audience. So that's a very unique thing of doing things. And even in reels, also, you get to know that perspective. So that's why they come pretty regularly in my feed, and I try to watch them at certain time, try to copy the ideas also.
No, look, I think, especially with this book, I'm known in so many different ways. Like, I will still sometimes be out. And in fact, I was out somewhere recently, and like someone came up to talk to me about Death of a Gentleman, which is obviously a documentary about, corruption and the way that Test cricket was being run and everything, right? And then I had this other guy who came to the book launch, and he was like, "Oh, I don't really like stats, so I'm not going to like this book." And I was like, "Well, I'm not. It's not a stats book. Like, it's not a book about stats at all." And he's like, "Oh, but all your stuff's about stats." And I went, "Mate, I was writing features for like 10 years before we even started doing any stats, right?" So some people know me as a stats person. Some people know me as a filmmaker. Some people know me as a feature writer. And so when I made this book, that's one of the reasons I want to write a book like this, where it sort of brings everything that I do well together. Like I'm not like Abhishek Mukherjee or David Firth. Like, I'm not that level of historian, but I do have a very good understanding of cricket history. I am a features writer slash I was trained. The only training I've ever had is as a screenwriter, right? So that's part of the reason I write in a slightly different style than everyone else, other than the fact that I'm also dyslexic. Um, but
Yes.
so I have a different way of writing than most cricket writers do, who come from a more journalistic point of view, whereas I come from a more screenwriting or documentary style, right? And so when making Art of Batting, that was the thing of like, I can do history here, I can do stats, I can do the romance, as you said, but it's also, I get to write this book, right? Like, if you read this book, I'd be very disappointed if anyone was like, well, he hasn't written the hell out of it, right? Like, that's what I have tried to do. It is supposed to be, a 80,000 or 100,000, how many words it ended up being, love letter to batting, right? Like, I didn't want it to be, it's the same when I did my, the last book before this was very similar in that it was a book about the history of Test cricket. I didn't want to do what Tim Wigmore's done, and Tim Wigmore's book is brilliant, but I didn't want to do that. I didn't want to do like a research heavy, archaic version of Test cricket. I wanted to hit on all the emotional beats of Test cricket. This is why this matters. This is why this matters. And that's what I tried to do with this book as well. So at times in the Art of Batting, it's like really scientific, right? Like, there's some heavy science in there, not even soft science. There's some heavy science in there at times. But then there's not, like, then there is romance, as you say, then there is, character stuff and, all these different parts of it. And that's really, I think, for me, the ability to use all my skills on a project. I don't always get to do that. Like, if we're doing a piece about, how number 5 position has changed in Test cricket. It's really fun piece, but I'm kind of just using one or two of my skills, right? Whereas in a book like The Art of Batting, I'm like throwing everything that I have at the wall.
Quite a amazing insight. Like, but just to begin the conversation, do you see any current batters in the current generation who've just started, who might not have featured in your book right now, but maybe might, like 10 years down the line, if you rewrite this book again, they would definitely be in those top 50. So, any current generation batters?
There's no one who would definitely be in, because obviously, there can be injuries or form or personal tragedies or whatever that changes things. I mean, I think if I was writing this book in 1974, I would have been like, so Lawrence Rowe will end up being a top 5 batter of all time, and Lawrence Rowe doesn't make the book, right? And really has a terrible end to his career. So it's a really tragic story. He had knee injuries, he had eyesight injuries, he was allergic to grass, Deepak. Like, of all the things that you could have, like, I think he also went through, I've never talked to Lawrence about this, but I think he also went through quite an emotional breakdown at times as well. So, but if you look at early Lawrence Rowe, he's clearly one of the best batters in the history of the game, right? And they thought, in the West Indies, they thought he was going to be Sobers, right? And I don't mean that in a way of like, we thought Ollie Pope was going to be good. I mean, Lawrence Rowe had been around and they thought he was going to be Sobers. So from that perspective, no. I think the obvious one is Jaiswal. He's the only person in modern cricket that I think has even a shot at being a top 10 batter of all time in this list. Right? Oh. Now, everything has to go right for him to be a top 10 batter, right? And some things probably, in some ways, he might have to exceed some of the expectations I have of him to get there. Harry Brook is obviously also in the conversation. I don't see him as potentially a top 10, but, if he has 3 or 4 more years like that, like he has at the moment, we're talking top 30, I would have thought, without any question, right? And then it's how long he plays and how he goes at the back end of his career and everything else. We have seen players, Harry Brook kind of reminds me a little bit of someone like Neil Harvey, where I don't think he's quite a complete player, but he's very good at as a young player and very sure of himself. What happens when that cracks, right? Does he continue to be like that, or does he come back? Who would be the other one? Obviously, Corso Mendes from Sri Lanka is another one that just purely on batting average alone, right? I still think you have to keep an eye on. I want to see more and more of him, but he's a fantastic talent as well. So I suppose those are the obvious ones. Rachin Ravindra, maybe you would throw in on the sort of the back end of that. Then you've got the that next wave of South Africans coming through, right? Of there's probably 3 or 4 younger guys there where you're like, well, we don't know where they're going to go, but some of those guys are incredibly talented. And then I'm still very interested in Bubba and Manas, right? Because when we started the book, Bubba and Manas were both I wouldn't say they were in the top 50, but they were in our long list. They were probably, I can't remember the numbers now, but we probably had them around 65 to 70 when we first started writing the list, right? And by the time we kind of pared that down, they weren't even in that area anymore, right? They both completely lost form. But we've seen players do that before and then get really, like, both of them are so, at their best, both of them are both such fantastic players that see the ball so early. And in Baba's case, technically incredibly proficient, right? And in Manas's case, willing to do all the work possible to make himself good. I do think there is an element of that they could have really good careers into their mid to late 30s, right? And because they were so good in their 20s, maybe we'll be able to put that together and say, look, there's actually a really good case for these players, but there may not be. So that's probably the 7 or 8 players that you're looking at the moment where you're like, and Shubman Gill's just come in. So now he's finding form. I was always very high on Shubman Gill. He's another person that if the form that we're seeing at the moment is just Shubman Gill for the next 5 or 6 years, then he's suddenly in that conversation as well. So I think there's quite a few players out there. But if you're talking about right at the top of the list, Jaiswal is the one that is the most obvious.
I think kind of resonate with that, because even during the series also, I think we've already seen the shades of Shubman Gill, different shades of him. Like in Edgbaston, he looked a very different batter, pretty assured. His getting caught at the crease, that problem that he always used to have, and going across, all those things were kind of eliminated. But then we saw all that coming back again in Lords, like in first innings also, when like the entire England attack was attacking his stumps, and then one that left him had him. And in second innings, he was all over the place. Like maybe the pressure of the chase, or maybe like as you have mentioned in your video also, that amazing video that like the 30 minutes of darkness, that video you have made, like the
Yeah.
strange thing that the certainly the batters tend to find it difficult to even I think spot the ball and all those things.
Yeah.
But
So I
he just
wouldn't worry about him as much at Lords. What I would say about Shubman Gill is that he's now proved he has the top end gear that people like me always thought. And don't people like KP took his victory lap. I haven't quite taken my victory lap on Shubman Gill yet. But my point all along was that he was in his early 20s and he was batting fine in what was a tough era. He was only going to get better when he got to 25, 26, 27, quite naturally. He hasn't got to 28 yet, right? So if Shubman Gill can average 40 to 42 over the next couple of years, and what is a tough era, there's no reason why he can't average 55 for a 4 or 5 year period after that, and then have that. It might be more than that. Who knows? The pitches might change. People might work out the wobble ball a little bit more. All these things might change, right? So I think, he still has a very high ceiling, but what he doesn't have is he probably has the more Ricky Ponting type ceiling, right? Whereas someone like Jaiswal, because he started so young and has been so good while he's been that young, it means that when he hits his peak, he might be averaging 45, 46 already, and then go on to average 55 to 60 in his peak, right? Or, some of those players, people like Kohli and Ponting, you're talking about 65, 70, 75, right? In some cases. If Jaiswal could do that, he can find another area that Shubman Gill can't. But Shubman Gill is definitely another player. I mean, there are a lot of players that we don't know how good they're going to be because they haven't reached that period of maturity yet, right? Like, so we don't know where they're going to go next. And as I said, I'm assuming that Harry Brook will have a slight regression in the way that Neil Harvey did. Neil Harvey's still one of the 50 greatest batters of all time, in my opinion.
But do you think so? Like even somebody like Pant would maybe upgrade his game going forward? Because suddenly in this series, I saw certain shades where at least he was trying to add more layers to his batting. What I could see, because like obviously he was even still trying to hit his way out of the trouble, but somehow I just felt that the little sense of calmness that was there around his batting earlier, like chaos and calmness, a perfect blend of it. That particular combination is somehow again coming back. Correct me if I'm wrong on this part.
No, I think you're right. I think he's developing. I don't know what Pant is going to be, right? The one person I would compare it as far as his attacking game, Adam Gilchrist had a much more success in the first half of his career than he did in the second.
Yes.
Right? And partly that is because at the first half of his career, everyone was fucking terrified of Adam Gilchrist, right? So you look at that first test match he plays, the second one where he carries a straight, that incredible winning in Hobart, right? Pakistan were terrified of him. They moved the field so quickly, right? And that was partly because they'd already seen him in one-day cricket, right? So we understand that it wasn't like, just the test. It was the whole impact of Adam Gilchrist over the previous 18 months. Over time, there aren't many players who managed to keep that element. So Viv Richards did, right? But Viv Richards, compared to Gilchrist and Rishabh Pant, is a much more rounded player, right?
Yes.
So I would probably compare Pant more to either Sehwag or Gilchrist. I'm trying to think of someone else on the back end. KP, right? KP. Where part of the reason they are playing so attacking is because they do have flaws within their game, right? And so they are, whether that's conscious or unconscious, they may not even know this themselves, but they kind of, there's a part of them goes, oh, I can't let him bowl here, right? So you look at Gilchrist slashing everything that was just outside off stump, right? That's because he wasn't particularly good at defending those balls, which, eventually Freddie Flintoff worked out, right? And so if you could pin him down, you could do that. And Rishabh Pant is kind of similar in that he knows that if you just bowl, a good length, especially just outside off stump, and you hang the ball outside off stump, he's probably eventually going to nick one of those. And we've seen him do that enough, you and I, and you and I are the sort of people that look at this stuff. We already know that is a thing, right? Is there a way one day where teams can work out how to pin him down and keep him there? and then his game changes a little bit. Whereas if you go to Viv Richards could have blocked, right? Viv Richards and Gordon Greenidge are really interesting cricketers because I think because Gordon Greenidge grows up in England, he has an English technique, and then he goes to the West Indies and he gets a West Indian mindset, which allowed Gordon Greenidge to go between the two, right? Which really helped. The
And he
similar
had
thing
very horrible, I think, end also because in last few years, I don't think so. He made much runs, right?
Yeah. Gordon Greenidge played on a couple of, his record isn't as good as it should be because he plays on a little bit too long. He should have averaged high 40s in a way that could dominate you, right? Like, and that was a tougher era. If he played in the 2000s, he would have averaged over 50.
Yes.
I would have thought the way that he played. So you look at someone like Gordon Greenidge, he played like that. Whereas I think what happens with Viv is Viv has a bit of a weirder technique, but he's still very technically correct. Even though he's playing across the line, he's doing that on purpose, right? But because he did play in England and he had to play on wickets where the ball was nibbling around and everything, and that matured his game, he had that ability. I don't think Sehwag or Rishabh Pant or Gilchrist or even Victor Trumper, if you want to go back, we're going back to OGs here. I don't think they quite have that. I think they have slightly more flaws within the way they play. So the attacking side for them is not like a personal statement. It's kind of a self-defense mechanism.
Yes.
So if you ask me if Rishabh Pant has the ability to get into the top 50, I think he probably does, right? Like, it's very possible. But remember, I didn't put Gilchrist in my top 50 either. The one big advantage that Pant has over Gilchrist is he bats at 5. And it's a much harder position than what Gilchrist is. So there is an element there. I think you're right of it's possible. But, I'm trying to think of some other players. I
think just wanted
let's say Travis Head had 4 great years from here.
Yes.
He's possible, right? Like there are players in the middle of their career where it's like it could swing it violently in either direction, right? Like Usman Khawaja is in the middle of terrible form. Yeah. When we were writing the book, we were like, is Usman Khawaja going to sneak into the top 50? And then you lose your form again. And let's say he goes for 2 more years where he averages 50. We're going to be thinking, oh, maybe he should be in the book.
Considering that he has shown that longevity also. But according to Ashwin, he wrote an article in local newspaper and he was mentioning one thing about Pant, that he has bowled a lot to him in the nets. And he just mentioned the one difference that he saw between Gilchrist and Pant is that people tend to underestimate Pant's defense a lot, according to Ashwin. Because Ashwin, I'm not very sure whether he is stating that with respect to playing spin, because obviously Ashwin would have seen that part more. Because clearly we saw in BGT also, when the ball was nibbling around and Pant's entry points were earlier, he was finding it difficult. When he was entering within 20 overs, when the double lacquer ball was still doing a bit, then Cummins was able to basically literally pin him down. And before the series, Cummins had a very horrible record against Rishabh Pant, but the complete stats changed because the entry points of Pant were a lot earlier than what it used to be earlier. And that's why I'm not very sure whether Ashwin's perspective is more about his technique against spin, because we have seen that even on dust bowls in India, he has a very solid technique. Even Wankhede 147 chase, even though he was attacking, but he was still able to blend it well. But I'm not very sure whether it comes to showing that defensive acumen in front of the moving ball, whether he still qualifies in that league or not.
No, I do think he has a good defense, but one thing I would say, and it'd be interesting to talk to Ashwin about this, the one thing I would say about his defense is he kind of decides he's going to defend the next ball before he defends it. Right?
Yes.
The best players, Sachin Tendulkar and, Brian Lara, that's not how they bat. Right? I'm not saying, there are periods where both of them are like, okay, let's pull it back a little bit here, let's defend it and everything else. But they're letting the ball dictate what they do. Right? That's not what Rishabh Pant does. In fact, he does the opposite of that. He decides if he's going to attack and he decides if he's going to defend, seemingly before the ball is bowled. So is his technical defense good? Yeah, I think it probably is. I think it's probably better than Gilchrist. I think I would agree with Ashwin there. But he's still a little bit like Ben Stokes or Ravi Jadeja. He's still a little bit like, I am going to block this one. I am going to rotate the strike on this one, or I'm going to attack this one, right? And that is not what the best batters of all time do, right? The best batters of all
Yeah.
time do not work on that programmed sort of style. So I do think from that perspective, you have to be you do have to think a little bit of he's not always going to be in the exact right position because he's already made a decision beforehand. So yes, he's a good player of the defensive shot, but sometimes he's defending balls that are too wide, right? Because he decided beforehand that he was going to defend that ball. Sometimes those are the ones he nicks, where he doesn't even need to be anywhere near them. So yeah, it's really interesting. Guys with second skills, right? Everyone I just mentioned, Gilchrist included, has a second skill. Their batting doesn't develop the same way that people who have who only bat does, right? People with genuine second skills usually have a limitation within their batting because of that, right? It's kind of what makes Callis and Sobers so special, right?
Yes.
You know, and also if you look at someone like Steve Waugh, maybe that's why we get the Steve Waugh we get, because when he stops bowling, he has to focus 100% on his batting. And in our heads, we're all like, oh, he starts playing more defensive. Maybe it isn't that he started playing more defensive. Maybe it's just that he realized, oh, I might not be able to bowl in this game, so I'm going to have to make more runs. So I'm going to have to work on my batting more now. And you change the way that you play a little bit at that point.
Quite a brilliant perspective, because this is actually, because even we see that whenever the entry points for the wicket keepers have been early, their averages have completely, I would say, they have gone downhill. Because even if we go back to somebody like Walcott also, his average as a keeper and as non-keeper was completely different. Even with Sangakkara, I think if any batter who would have justified those numbers would be AB de Villiers, because I don't think so there was a significant dip in his average.
So, that's in the book. I don't know if you've got to that bit in the book. Do you want me to explain that one to you?
Yeah, please. So I have not reached to that part.
Yeah, it's really cool, because I was talking to it with Neil Manthorpe the other day, and he was saying, oh, but AB de Villiers averaged a lot more when he kept. So I basically narrowed it down to this in the book, which is Walcott and Sangakkara, and you can add McCullum in there as well. And there's a few others, obviously. There aren't that many people who've done a lot of wicket keeping and a lot of non-wicket keeping tests, but there's a few of them, right? All of those guys have lower batting averages when they keep than when they don't keep. And then AB de Villiers suddenly out of nowhere averages like 57, right?
Yeah.
So does that mean that AB de Villiers was a much better athlete than these other guys? Or is it the fact that all those other guys were wicket keepers when they were young to get into the side, wicket kept when they were learning cricket, and then when they get rid of the gloves is when they're peaking as a batter and when they become specialists so they can actually spend more time on it? Because the reason AB de Villiers has such a high average as a wicketkeeper is he wicket keeps during his peak, whereas everyone else wicket keeps on their way up to get into the side. Brilliant. Right. So I talked to Kumar about this a little bit in the book. And he, you know, that was something that he talked about a little bit as well. We've looked at it in first class cricket. There really isn't any impact from wicket keeping in first class cricket, right? Like it's negligible. Like it really is. It's maybe one run, right, out of your average. Like it's very small. There's a bit of a larger spike in test cricket, but as I said, the data is a bit tough because we don't have people who've played as much, right? But we've had a lot more people who wicket keep and don't wicket keep in first class cricket. But in test cricket, it's a little bit different because we have that weird pattern I just said. Like basically, McCullum's like, I'm good enough as a batter now. I don't need to keep anymore. Well, that you've already told us now that you've changed as a batter if you're willing to make that decision from then on in. But the other thing that I would add to that is that the games go longer in test cricket. And we have seen a drop off in the fourth innings of wicket keeping.
Yes.
So there is a little bit of more of a drop off in test cricket, but it's not like you might remember these numbers better than me. But I think Walcott and Sangakkara both average around 40 to 45 with the gloves on, and then obviously over 50 without them. Yes. But if you look at the age curve they were on, I think that's actually a fairly natural progression that they were making. And also, if you think about it from a sort of an athletic point of view, they're only doing half the job afterwards. So even if it's not that the wicket keeping was like they were used to it, but surely it's a bit like if I'm carrying 4 pails of water on my shoulders up a hill, right? And then the rest of my life, when I'm at peak, in my peak, I'm carrying 2. It's going to feel a lot easier, right? So there must be just a weight that comes, in this case, quite literally off your shoulders in that anecdote, right? That comes off your shoulders there. So I don't think the wicket keeping affects batters as much as the numbers of the great players or even the mid-range players make it look. But there is certainly an impact there. So again, what we might see a similar thing with Rishabh Pant. What happens if he reaches 27, 28 and Dhruv Jurel is good enough to just play in the side and they decide to go with Dhruv Jurel from then on in, right? That might do it. Gilchrist, though, always said that wicket-keeping helped his batting. And a lot of wicket-keepers will say this. And one of the reasons is that they feel like they can read the pitch a lot better. So when they go out to bat, they understand. And the other thing is Gilchrist thought like an all-rounder. Does Rishabh Pant think like an all-rounder? I reckon he does. So if you take the gloves away from Rishabh Pant, will he play with the same freedom? He probably won't. He'll probably change his batting. And I think he needs that freedom. Whereas I think if you take the gloves away from Walcott and Kumar, and let's go back to a really fantastic example, would be Andy Flower. I don't think Andy Flower would have been any different with or without the gloves on, right? Because Andy Flower thought like a batter. Okay?
Yes.
So I do think there is a difference there.
I think I got inspired from your last interaction also, because you mentioned beautifully about subconscious and conscious mind while batting. So actually, I was researching about AB de Villiers. I was doing a members only podcast on him because a lot of people were asking for it. That's why I was dwelling through his numbers also. I kind of added a new perspective to it, inspired from what we discussed last time. Is it the reason that why somehow AB de Villiers has not been able to perform that well in the knockouts, because his batting is more about being in the conscious than the subconscious part? Because one, that he always tries to watch the ball till the last moment, even during all those his trigger movements, like all his shots, everything in his repertoire is all about making those last minute, last, I would say, microsecond adjustments. So is it the case that he always remains in that conscious self instead of being in the subconscious mind? Maybe like somebody like Virat Kohli, who follows a template, would like then put his mind into an autopilot mode where he knows that this is the template he needs to follow while chasing. There will be a single around the corner. There will be a boundary now, like that. Whereas AB de Villiers always wants to be in his conscious self because of his style of batting, because of his those last moment triggers, and due to that certain time, the pressure, the game situations, all those things play on his mind. I was just like trying to build this narrative and trying to understand if this might be the reason, considering the game style he had.
I wouldn't have thought so. It's also worth looking. I in ODI cricket, he plays in 7 finals, and doesn't he average like 40? Like it's the same with the Chris Gayle one, right? I remember everyone used to say the same thing about Chris Gayle, and then you would look up his results in finals games, and you'd be like, actually, it looks like he does pretty well, guys. Like, all things considered, there's no issue here. No, look, I think AB de Villiers is a very different kind of player to Virat Kohli. What you're really talking about there, I don't actually think is about conscious or subconscious, because I still think that AB de Villiers at his best is getting to the subconscious state, right? Like, so when he's talking about facing Mitchell Johnson with Mitchell Johnson bowling underarm to him, I still think that's very much in the subconscious state, right?
Subconscious, yeah.
Even if there's more conscious stuff to get him there than there is for someone else. I think what you're talking about is that sort of what Virat Kohli can do is what MS Dhoni and Michael Bevan did, right? Which is they turn it into an algorithm or a formula, and then they play their cricket to that formula, which means that it's a very narrow thing that they need to do, right? They know exactly what they need to do, and then they're talented enough to be able to do it. That's probably harder for AB de Villiers because, with all due respect to those other 3 guys, they don't have his options.
Yes.
His talent is infinite, right?
Exactly.
I don't think we've ever seen a player in the history of our sport with as many options as AB de Villiers has for every single ball. Now, Sobers and Bradman might also have been on a similar kind of level, and Lara wasn't far off it either. But I don't think, but a lot of the shots that existed didn't exist when they were playing, right? Like, Lara doesn't really play the reverse sweep very much. I think he might play it occasionally, but he doesn't need to because he could cut half volleys. But if he played now, he would play the reverse sweeps, and maybe Lara will play scoops and all these sorts of other things. And obviously in Bradman and Sobers days, a lot of those shots just weren't even an option, right? So when AB de Villiers goes out to bat, he has every single option available to him. So there is probably a little bit more cluttering of the mind, and he probably doesn't quite have the certainty of Sobers or the machine like brain of Bradman to be able to handle the fact that he can do everything, right? And I think it affected Lara at times as well. There were some times when I was like, Lara, if you compare Lara to Sachin, it's really interesting because sometimes Lara just had too many options, whereas Sachin just had the normal options to play for each ball. And then, okay, so instead of knocking this one to mid on, I'm going to knock this one wide of mid on. Whereas Lara to the same balls, like, instead of knocking this to mid on, I can hit this to third man, right? So I do think there is an element of once you open that up, it does become, and if I don't know how much club cricket you played, but I'm a perfect example of this in club cricket where my biggest problem as a club cricketer is I have all the shots, right? I would be much better if I had like 2 or 3 shots, but I can drive in every direction that you need to be able to drive. I can cut, I can late cut, I can sweep, I can reverse sweep, I can use my feet to spinners, I can pull, I can hook, I can pull, I can flick off my pads. I can hit the ball anywhere I need to at any one stage, right? And so I usually get out playing one of those shots I don't even need to play, right? Yes. On this particular pitch, maybe all I need to do on this pitch is block and wait for the over-pitched ones and to drive them. But I can't help it. Oh, he's bowled short. I'm going to have to pull that. Oh, it's got me a little bit low. So sometimes having too many options can cause you extra problems from that point of view. So maybe it's better to be, I don't know, Ivan Lendl than it is to be, I'm trying to think of another player from that era. Then, maybe it's better to be Ivan Lendl than it is to be, I don't know, let's say Jimmy Connors, because Ivan Lendl knows that his game is just this, and he can absolutely maximize his tennis play around what Ivan Lendl does. Whereas maybe someone like Jimmy Connors is a little bit more, wider game. He can play at the net, he can play back, he can, counter attack, he can force the pace and all this sort of stuff. Maybe that's tougher at some stages because you're not maximizing what you do.
Yes, this is what exactly I wanted to understand. So, if you have more options, how can you be in your subconscious mind then? Won't it be like you want to be in your conscious because you want to execute all those options? So, this is what is I'm not able to understand about AB de Villiers as a batter because, like, since Virat Kohli knows that he has a limited option, so like driving that car, like the way we are driving when we know we are reaching to a certain destination, there's a way to it. We don't have any options. We do it in a subconscious mind. But when we know that maybe we have to keep tap of the Google map, there might be traffic congestion somewhere. We have to find a way.
It's raining. There's a storm.
It's raining or something of that sort. So this is real. This is something which I really wanted to understand. Like, is it like AB de Villiers had to be more switched on just because he had so many options?
No, I don't think so. I think it's, if we go back to Bradman, so let's say, and I picked those 4 players on purpose of AB, Lara, Sobers, and Bradman. And you could probably throw Viv Richards in there as well, but let's just keep the other 4 in there for now. Of probably being the players who are the most complete packages, right? Where they, for their time, they could do everything that was available to them, right? Those players, in order to be able to maximize that, you probably need to be a maniac like Bradman, right? So again, I'll go back to it. I played on a cricket pitch recently where I was very conscious of what I was doing. I hate this cricket pitch. It's my home club's cricket pitch and it keeps low, right? And it doesn't suit my game. I don't mind wet English wickets. I don't mind ragging pitches, right? Like, even though I'm Australian, those 2 things are fine to me. But I don't like the wickets where the ball just consistently keeps low, because in my head, I'm always waiting for a short ball, right, to be able to whack over mid wicket, whether it be from a spinner or a pace ball, right? And in my head, I was training myself to be like, no, just get on the front foot every single ball. No one here's going to be able to bounce you. Flick the ball away. When it's full, drive it. When it's full toss, whack it into the gap, and that's all you need to do. And I was batting really, really well. And then a guy came in and he bowled a slow ball that was a half volley on off stump. And I could see him cock his wrist beforehand. That's subconscious, right?
Yes.
Then the minute I see that, my brain just ticks in, this is a slow ball and you smash slow balls and you've already picked this. And so I'm like, well, and without thinking, my subconscious takes over and it's like, well, you're going to whack this now. And I haven't whacked a single ball in this innings. I've probably been batting for about 30 or 40 balls. I'm on 20, 25 not out. I haven't whacked a single ball, right? But the minute that happens, my subconscious goes, oh, great. This is your boundary ball, right? And of course, I smash it and it's a little bit fuller than I think it's going to be. And mid-on takes a hanging one-handed catch and I'm out, right? I don't have the ability to rein that part of my batting in, whereas not that I'm comparing myself to Bradman because I'm a shit club cricketer, but Bradman does, right? AB de Villiers can, on his best day, do that. Whether he could do that consistently, probably he couldn't, right? Whereas Virat Kohli can do that consistently, right? But Virat Kohli doesn't have as many triggers that AB de Villiers has,
yes.
right? So it's easier to do that if you don't have every single shot in the book available to you, because you could do that. The second thing is, and this comes back to the whole Sachin Tendulkar thing, right? That the no cover drives in Sydney. Again, that's a bit like Bradman. That's a maniac level thinking that you could completely reprogram your brain to take away one particular shot, right? How hard? It's easy to say that, and it's easy to do it in practice for like 10 or 15 balls. How hard is that to do that on the 150th ball or the 200th ball or the 250th ball? Because eventually you're like, oh, I'm in now. I could probably play a cover drive now, right? And that's what most there's probably heaps of batters who've done it for like 50 balls, right? Yes. Got to 30, be like, I'm seeing them fine now. Cover drive's not going to be an issue. Play the first cover drive, second slip, gone, right? So there is a bit of a thing between the conscious and the unconscious, and it's very hard for a batter, especially, let's go back to AB de Villiers, because he can do things that no one else can do, right? If you are even like, if you think about, the way, I don't know if you've ever played any of the cricket games aren't particularly good, but if you play any of the football games or the basketball games, and they have all the skills of the players, right? So Virat Kohli, let's say there's 15 different skills that make you a great batter. Virat Kohli might be at 10 for like 10 of them, and he might be at like 5 for a couple. Maybe he's at 2 for one, right? Whatever.
Yes.
Right? When you're at 10 for almost all of them, it's a very different situation at that point, right?
Exactly.
And I'm not saying AB's at 10 for all of them, but he's probably 8 for all of them, right? Like the lowest one you would have for AB might be technical, and he's probably an 8 or a 7 on technical, right? Like, and so at that point, you never have to play within yourself until a certain situation demands it. Now we know he could do it because he made 40 or 200 balls or something in a test match, and I think there was another test match he did that, right? But that is when he completely lets his conscious take over, right?
He did that in Adelaide and then did it in Delhi also in 2000.
Delhi, yeah, was the other one, yeah. So that sometimes is easier because at that stage, when you're making that kind of decision, you are completely changing everything. He would have changed his triggers. He would have changed his backlift. He would be like, and just to go back again, as I said, I'm a very shit cricketer, but I had to do that in a game once, and I found that easy as hell. And all my friends were like, wait a minute, all you ever do is slog, and you play every shot in the book, and then we have to play for a draw, and you just batted for 5 hours and made 7 runs. And I went, yeah, I found it really easy, right? Because
you did that.
Suddenly there was this external thing on, right? And I didn't have to worry about it. And there was no reason to play any shots. So even if I saw the slower ball here, it's like, oh, fine, bang, 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 right? My problem, and I would say anyone who sort of plays in that, and I'm talking about, this is not just attacking players. It's almost a form of free-flowing players where you have the access to all those different shots, right? The sort of a Mark Waugh level player would be a really good example of someone like this. I'm trying to think of someone else, a James Vince sort of player, right? Where it's sort of just, it's, yeah, you're going to pitch up and I'm going to hit it through covers. Yeah, and I'm going to play this shot and I'm going to do this, whatever. You sort of get yourself into this state of, I don't know which option to use each ball because I have multiple options, right? When you take all of that away and it's just doing something else, I think it rewires your brain a little bit. Where I think those sorts of players find it really tough is when there is no constraints, right? So first inning, yeah. So I think that's where those players can sometimes find it very tough when they have no constraints, or maybe that's what they need. It might be the opposite. They need no constraints at all, right? The whole Steve Smith thing. Why does Steve Smith make runs in the first innings? Because the first innings is just about batting. It's the only innings that is just about batting. So he doesn't have to worry about what the total is. He doesn't have to worry about the follow-on. He doesn't have to worry about getting a lead, right? He doesn't have to worry about anything else other than the ball is coming down and it is my job to make runs. Every innings after that has context, right? And so you see players who are much better in context. Sunil Gavaskar, I haven't looked at his ODI numbers, but I know in Test cricket, much better the further the game went. Some of that
Yes.
is because of how brilliant he played spin, but it's not just that, because he could have averaged more against spinner in the first innings as well, when actually the spinners aren't dominating at all at that stage in the game. I think he got better the more he was like, okay, now I'm going to bat like this for this. And you look at that great innings of Sunil Gavaskar against Pakistan in his last knock, right? If we had cameras and we had proper footage of that, that's up there with the Sachin Tendulkar cover drive, right? He completely changed his technique for that innings 2 different ways, right? So he's a player that probably needs that, and that activates his brain. And so I think that the way that brain elasticity works, the way that processing works, is going to be very different for AB de Villiers to Virat Kohli to Sunil Gavaskar to Steve Smith, right? But those best guys probably have enough different triggers that they can be a combination of conscious and unconscious. And if you listen to Brian Lara, I always found this really interesting. I don't know if you've ever seen this, but Brian Lara basically batted in waves, right? So he would always say, I can't remember if it was the first 20 minutes or the first 20 balls, but I think he mentions it in the book. He would give the first bit to the bowler, right? It'd be like, great,
yes,
I don't need to dominate here. If you bowl a bad ball, I will hit it, but I'm not going to come out and I'm going to do anything. Then once he was in, he would show who was in charge, right? Great. Now you're going to bowl the ball at the top of off stump and I'm going to hit it to backward point. And you're going to put out a deep point, and then next ball, I'm going to flick it on the leg side. And now you have no idea what to do, right? I'm going to let you know. Ooh, but now the bowler's coming back, and he goes back and he rides a wave. How much of that is him going into a subconscious state for a little while, and then something breaking him out of the subconscious state? Maybe it's a great ball, right, that rips past the outside edge or bounces up at him. He's like, oh, need to go back to conscious for a minute. Bat in here. Now I'm set again. This guy's got a bit tired. Subconscious takes back over. Is he making that decision, or is just that just the way his brain elasticity works, right? Those are the sorts of things that we don't. These players can't even answer this. And as you know, I talked to Lara and Dravid and AB de Villiers and Kumar Sangakkara. They can't always explain what they are doing.
Yes.
Right? And the players who are quite often better at explaining it are the people at the other end, the Jimmy Adams, right? And the Chris Rogers and the Ross Taylors. They can sometimes explain it better because they're not quite at that level. And they can see the player changing, right? And, you know, I can't remember if we talked about it last time around, but there's that great story of Bob Knocker-White, who played for Nottingham, who's like an all-rounder batting at like number 6, number 7. And he would bat with Garfield Sobers all these times. And he would ask Garfield Sobers for all this advice, you know, how did you do this? And why did you do that? Whatever. And Sobers would give him all this advice. And Bob Knocker-White was a legend, right? He played for 20-something years in first-class cricket, and then he umpired for 30 years, right? Like an absolute legend of cricket. And he would listen to Sobers and be like, oh, yeah, that makes sense. Go back to the net. Bold. Right? Because Sobers could tell him what he did.
Yes.
But I think Rahul Dravid said it best when Rahul Dravid was explaining the hovering front foot to me. He's like, I can tell you the exact moment that you need to use the hovering front foot and how you need to come forward or go back. I can see it even if I'm not batting. I can't tell anyone else how to do it. Yes. Because if I tell them, it's too early or too late. And that's the Sobers thing. So Sobers, his big thing was English players play the ball too early. They need to play it later, right? Instead of going forward, they need to wait and move to the last minute. But if you are Garfield Sobers and you are one of the greatest athletes who has ever lived in any sport, you can wait later. If you're Bob Knocker-White and you average 28 in first-class cricket, you can't, right? And that's the thing of they don't, even when they give advice, it doesn't always work for other players because they're not playing the same sport. And I think if you listen to some of the things that Virat Kohli has said about AB de Villiers, to bring it all back to AB de Villiers, that's what sometimes he's talking about with AB. He doesn't always learn anything from AB because AB, to, you know, the way that Virat talks about him, is a different species.
Yes.
Right? Whereas I bet Virat learned a lot from people like Rahane and Ross Taylor, maybe even someone like KP and these sorts of guys, because those are guys who are overcoming just normal things. Whereas you're talking to AB de Villiers, right? And this is my favorite story. You know, briefly when I worked with RCB, they would tell me this one all the time. The guys absolutely love this story, which was a young player would come out, and AB de Villiers would be like, got to watch this guy. This guy, really good bowler. Just be careful with this guy, right? And then AB would face the next ball and wrap it for 6, right? and I tried to talk to him about that, and he was like, "Oh, I always try to help people." I said, "Yeah, but your help is not like you're almost making them feel worse, because the first thing is they're like, oh my God, if AB thinks this guy's tough, how am I going to face him? And then on the back end, it's like, if AB thinks this guy's tough and he's slipping here for 6, I'm not even going to get a single off this guy, right?" And so that the AB story and the sober story is basically telling you that these guys do not inhabit a normal situation that the rest of us, that the rest of even some of the greatest batters of all time do, right? And so they are working on a plane that does not fully exist. And batters will this is the longest answer I've ever given in my life on anything, but batters will very much, what's the best way of putting it? Athletes actually talk about this more than batters, but it's very similar for batters. They say that you can either know too much or too little, right? And what they're basically saying is there are some people who can completely, Sachin would be a perfect example of this. He knows every different element of his batting, and he can tell you, this is a pitch for a 210 bat, not a 211 bat, right?
Yes.
Right. He can tell you that. He knows the difference, and he can put that. He knows too much, and it's fine. Then you
Even
have
Kallis, for that matter, was used for this role by KKR. I read it somewhere that he would bat for a certain time and would tell KKR what exactly is the score for this wicket. So his role was this.
Kane Williamson. So those are guys who know too much, right? Yes. And they understand that perfectly. And Kallis can look at someone in the nets and be like, your balance is wrong straight away, right? And he can work you out and do that. And then you've got the players who know too little, right? So Adam Gilchrist and Rishabh Pant might be players who fit into that, but there's plenty of other players like that. If you ask them to deconstruct their batting, they will actually get confused.
Exactly.
Right. And so athletes talk about this. You either want to be the person at one end of the extreme or the other end. The guys in the middle are the ones who are caught in stasis, where you know enough, but not quite enough to help you. And you can't ever let go and just be in the moment. And those players, those guys in the middle, that's sort of, I think there's a really good example of this. Was it, someone was telling me about this the other day. I can't remember if was it, God, it was a first class cricketer or a test cricketer who was telling me this story, that they made a decision to retire during the year, right? And when they retired, they then went on an absolute tear of making nothing but runs after that. And it's because they were stuck in that middle stasis, right? And when they retired, they went back to not caring as much and not worrying and just facing each ball as it came to them, right? And once they did that, the balls just rebounded off them, right? So again, talking about, you could argue that this is conscious and unconscious, right? You could argue it in any different way.
Even with Cook also, it happened like that only. He was like at the end of his career, when he was just about to retire, he kind of was not making any runs. But I think in the first class career after his retirement, he was still making truckload of runs. Like
who was this? Sorry,
Alistair Cook, also in 2018.
Yeah, and I think with Alistair Cook, you're probably right. I think he got to a point where he was struggling in Test cricket and just went back and just wasn't as worried, right? And probably just faced each ball as is. Karun Nair was going to retire, right? So we got another one with Karun Nair, who then, and what Karun Nair managed to do was kind of bottle that, right? And Ed Cowan, Karun Nair and Ed Cowan are two players off the top of my head, and Tim Payne would be a third one. All three of those guys had basically made decisions to retire.
Yes.
Played out the end of that season in this new state. And because of that, and I would say with Ed Cowan, what happened with Ed Cowan, is he actually probably went back into the middle ground eventually. He couldn't keep it, right? And maybe Karun Nair will do the same. Whereas, some players just managed to be like, no, this is where it's fine. I never expected to play Test cricket again because I was already ready to retire. So I'm just going to play each ball as it comes, and what will happen, right? And it's tough.
So what do you think actually is the problem with Karun Nair in this series? Because a lot of people have been asking this question that to begin with, he looks good, but like a stance is more leg side-ish, where I think he has played some beautiful on drives also, but with that open stance, Like the moment the balls are on the off stump, a little hard lengths, and he's all over the place. So is it because even I was listening to Varun Aaron also, and he said that he saw this technical deficiency while observing him in first class also. But still, he was making runs in England, like during the practice matches and all. And suddenly
Yeah.
everything changed in the test match. And considering that wickets have been little flat in these three test matches. So, what has been your observation? Like, where did he go wrong?
I actually think he's batted fine. He's just got out. Is probably the way that I would say it. So that's not what anyone wants to hear. Everyone wants to hear he's finished or whatever. But I actually think he's. I think on 2 or 3 occasions I'm like, it looks like he's batting on wheels here, and he's about to make a big score, and then suddenly he goes out.
Exactly.
There's an element of, I think there is an element of, because he doesn't move his feet massively, which is fine. I'm not against that. He probably is going to play more balls away from his body than anyone else. And so when he gets to 50 or 60, they won't be 3 slips in, right? But he's not getting to that score. So England can, and he's not that fast a scorer. So England can keep the slips in. And also the kind of team that England are, they might keep them in anyway. But yeah, I haven't been that worried about him technically. I think he lost the ball at the end of day 4 in the last test. I think he.
But if we would have observed that ball, to be honest, the seam of that ball was still pointing towards third man also. So was it like because Cars was bowling away swingers throughout in that spell? So was it actually a mental miss, or he?
No, I just think he thought. No, I think he thought it was going to be a 1.5 wider, maybe 2 feet wider. Like I don't think he picked the ball up at all because he was set. If you look at the way he sets up, he's actually setting up for a ball that's back of a length outside the stump. And he gets a full ball on the stump. So I wouldn't worry about that. Did he get, was it in one innings? Was it at Edgbaston? And he got one that kicked up and he got an edge to it, right? He's also got a great catch.
In Lord's first inning. When that ball was away, like it was moving away. And one.
Oh, wait. No, was it, didn't he also get a great catch at Headingley?
Headingley, yes. Ollie Pop in first innings.
So he's had 2 great catches. He's had one that he didn't pick, another one that spat off the wicket when nothing was spinning off that wicket for hours. In 6 dismissals, that's the way I would look at it at the moment.
And one he got caught or cotton ball also, like Vokes, where he was driving on the up and he was caught by the ball itself. So
those are not particularly. I wouldn't put those all together and be like I'd be much more worried if he was going out LBW over and over again or caught behind or caught in the cordon over and over again. Those are actually quite varied dismissals when you put it out like that, right? And I don't think England have been on top of him. I think most of the times when he's gone out, you're just like, oh, he's about to make some runs here, and then he goes out. So exactly. I'm not all that worried about what he has done. I would continue to play him. They probably won't, right? They might have to make a decision based on Rishabh Pant's finger anyway, so they might have to make a change. But I have no issues with the way he's batted. He just hasn't made runs, and this is a thing that's really hard to explain to people. But that's kind of what you and I are looking for. We're not just we're sometimes you're looking for analysis to show you that there's a problem. Sometimes you're doing the opposite, and you're like, is there a pattern here? Not really. He doesn't move his feet that much. But as Karun Nair said, he wasn't moving his feet that much when he was making all of his runs. He wasn't moving his feet all that much when he was making runs, right? It's a bit like the Jaiswal thing. So, I did the piece about Jaiswal getting struggling with the short balls outside off stump, right? Which is a really weird thing to have an issue with. I wasn't saying, oh, this means he's done. I was saying this is something that teams will try and exploit against him, and it'll be interesting to see what he does against it. Well, now we've already seen what he tried to do. He tried to pull a ball that he should have tried to cut, right? Yeah. And he still went out to the short ball outside of stump, right? Actually, if I was talking to Jaiswal, I'd be like, they got you out for like 86, mate. If they want to bowl short and wide outside of stump and you're going to hit them for 86 every time, do it. Like, sometimes you will make 150 doing this. If you start going out for 10 or 15, that's when you change it. And too often players change things because there's a pattern, but the pattern actually isn't affecting their run scoring.
Right? And even Kumar Sangakkara during the commentary, even in the first over, was able to pick up something. There was a wide ball from Vokes, and like Jaiswal just left it, didn't go for the cut. And Sangakkara, like after, because he's observed Jaiswal from such a close quarters, at Rajasthan Royals. So he was pretty worried. He said like maybe because he was standing close in for all this while and he saw balls misbehaving from the nursery end and also a little bit from the pavilion end. So maybe that thing kind of got into his head because I've not seen him so unsure outside his off stump. Generally, he would just cut that ball for four. And in the next over itself, we saw that a confused shot from him where he was maybe worried that maybe Jofra's ball would kick off of the length from the nursery and or might shoot low. That's why he was a little uncertain and he went for that half-hearted jab, like something which just didn't make any sense. So because even something I think over
So just to
before,
get back on your point, to go back to what you were talking about before, he used to play the balls outside off stump subconsciously,
yes,
and now he's playing them consciously.
consciously, exactly, brilliant.
Right? That's essentially what you are seeing in real time with Jaiswal. And so that doesn't mean he will play them poorly just because he has in one innings, right? But that's the difference. I don't think he would have looked at my article. I mean, it's possible that someone in the team had sent it to him or whatever, but I think it is likely that an analyst or a coach or even Jaiswal picked up, they are bowling short to me outside off stump. And why are they doing that? Is there a reason they're doing that? Oh, it's because I quite often go out doing this. I hadn't even realized myself, which is sometimes true as well. So now he's playing knowing that is coming. Whereas up until this point in Test cricket, everything he has done has been subconscious, right? The ball comes to Jaiswal, he does his thing, right? Now he's entering that next phase where he has to work out. And it's really exciting when you see young players like this because we said at the top, his ceiling is as high as anyone I have covered from a young age. I think his ceiling is higher than Steve Smith's. Now, Steve Smith broke through his ceiling, so that's a different kind of thing. But I think his ceiling is as high as, I looked at Joe Root and said, he's going to be England's next great batter and he's going to play for the next 10 years after one innings, right? And I think Jaiswal's higher than that. That's how high I have him. But this is the bit where we find out if he is a top 10 player or if he's 10 to 30 or if he's 30 to 80, right? And the difference is how he deals with each individual challenge as they come to him, right? And this is step one of 10 other things that bowlers are going to work out through the course of his life. Not to mention, he will get injured, so his back lift will change, right? His back will hurt, so he won't be able to move in the same way that he used to. He'll have to play with broken fingers. Will he be able to, all that sort of stuff. That is what gets you to the top of the tree. It's the ability to problem solve all the way through. It's very hard to just be great because the game doesn't allow you to be great. It works on bowlers are paid money to work you out, right? So they spend all their time doing that.
I have a couple of questions here because I was listening to one of the conversations of yours with Bumble, and there, like, I think Harmison was also there in the discussion, and they were discussing about your book also. And then they came to this question about Joe Root, that if Joe Root manages to break Sachin's record, maybe a couple of years, 3 years down the line, will he be in the top five batters of all time or not? And somehow then the camera panned onto you and you said he's in top 20, but like the conviction in your voice was still missing for that top 5 spot for Joe Root. Like, why so? I just want to understand this. Like, where you would actually want him to be if like he really wants to qualify in that top 5 ranking of yours.
So the top 5 is very hard. I think it's very hard to get into the top 5. So I'm actually just getting the God. This book's got so many words in it. I think it's very hard to get in the top 5 because Don Bradman plays for over 20 years, right? Sachin Tendulkar plays for what, 24 years?
24 years.
Yep. Jack Hobbs plays for over 20 years and makes 197 or 199 first-class hundreds. And Len Hutton plays for 20 years as well, 19 years or whatever his is, right? So that's the top 4. Then at 5 and 6, you have Steve Smith and Brian Lara, right? So Brian Lara doesn't quite have the longevity of some of these other people, but he has like 2 peaks in his career that are just as, and his peaks are probably as high as any peaks of anyone, right? Like the fact that you can lose a world record and decide within 6 months to take it back is fucking obscene, right?
And he wrote it in the article. It's a paper before the series that I'm going to do that in the series. So that was insane. I clearly
And
remember in my childhood I read that article.
yeah, and so if you think about it from that perspective, like if we'd had players who kept breaking Lara's record, he might have broken that record like 6 times, right? Like he needed that. So that's a hard player to go past, right? But at 6 is Steve Smith. So Steve Smith is not in the top 5, right? And we have seen Root and Smith at the same time. I love Root, and he's, I think he's such a great player. I don't think he's better than Steve Smith. If they both play for another 3 years, right, it's very hard for Root to go past Smith. And at the moment, Smith's in a slightly better form than Root is, although Root's just swinging back. Form is temporary and all that sort of thing. But if Smith continues to bat at the level he has been batting in the last 6 months, 8 months, and he goes back to averaging 55 for 2 or 3 more years, how does Root get past Smith when we saw them next to each other and everyone thought Smith was the better bat?
Right? Anything.
And Smith's not in my top 5. Right? So he's not in that top 5 already. Now, can Smith go past Lara? Absolutely. Right? It is very hard to break into that top 4 because I think those are, I think they're just set in absolute stone. But there are things that Root can do. If he plays a few more innings where he's scoring 100 at like 70, 80 runs per ball, and he breaks Sachin's record, then we start to look at it. But remember that if Bradman had played as many games as Root, right? Like, what's Root on? 140 test matches? Do you know that off the top of your head?
He has more than that, I guess. 140 something. If even I don't have the exact number.
So Bradman had 156 test matches, right? 156. So that 156 test matches, he plays his first test in 2010, was it? 2012. So he's 13 years into his career.
Yeah, India series. Around that.
13 years into his career. We're comparing that to guys who dominated for 19 or 20 years, who were, in Bradman's case, the best batter in the world in almost the entire time.
And the best sports person ever, because the delta that he created with the second best is unparalleled in any sports.
But Hobbs, probably the best batter in the world for 60% of the time he played, right? For Sachin, there's a Sachin, Lara, and Ponting obviously comes in at one stage as well, and then Callis, whatever. But Sachin is probably the best batter in the world for huge periods of time, right? Maybe 7 or 8 years of his 24-year period. He's probably the best batter in the world, right? How many years has Root been the best batter in the world? And then how many years of service does he have? Right?
I totally agree with
Most of the time that Joe Root's been great, Steve Smith has still been the best batter in the world.
Yes, totally agree with.
And when he wasn't, Virat had his peak, right? So when you look at it from that perspective, it is hard to make a case that Joe Root is in the top 5 best players of all time. And yes, he might end up with Sachin's record, but he'll end up with Sachin's record in part because England play so many test matches, right? Bradman, in 52 test matches, Bradman makes 7,000 runs, right? That means if he played 150 test matches, we'd be looking at 21,000 runs.
21,000 runs, imagine.
Right? Now, obviously, you take Bradman out of that, but if you look at someone like Jack Hobbs, who's probably, all things considered, still going to play 4 or 5 years more than Joe Root. So how do you compare that to what Root has done? Longevity plays a part, right? And also peaks play a part. And Root doesn't actually have either of those arguments in his place. There's a couple of things I think he massively gets, right? One is, I don't think I've ever seen a great player sacrifice himself for as much for the team as Root did, where he just went, okay, we're going to play reverse scoops now. Fine. I'm going to play reverse scoops now. He doesn't need to play reverse scoops, Deepak. He was fine. He wasn't the one not making any runs. It was everyone else in the team.
And we saw that, like in third test match in 2024 series, when he got out to Bumrah playing that reverse sweep. And in the next test match, Ranchi, he went back to his old template and he scored a brilliant 100 on a very difficult track, where everybody else is finding it difficult to bat.
He played one of the worst shots I've ever seen a great player play in that same series when he came down the wicket to Ashwin and tried to slog him.
Yes, do you remember and he got caught at, I think, a point, the outside edge, and the ball flew to point. At a very in Vizag, he did that. And in the clutter, really England lost the wickets.
So when I was chatting to Raul for the book, I don't think this is in the book, But it was something that we might have talked about even after we stopped recording. I can't remember, but I remember it chatting, and he said, what was Root's worst shot in that series? Right. And I think he expected me to say the reverse scoop. And I went, oh, the shot to Ashwin. And he went, yes. He said, no one thinks that way, but that is a way worse shot than reverse scoop. The reverse scoop actually makes some sense because he's taking the slips out. It disrupts Bumrah. Bumrah can't bowl his best ball anymore, right? Yes. And there's an element of it. The shot to Ashwin was a low chance of being successful anyway.
Because Ashwin was bowling from around the wicket, I guess, because the angle was also against him.
The fielders were out too.
Yes.
So the only way he could be successful in that shot is to absolutely middle it, and he's on the move while he's trying to middle it. So his chances are he's not going to middle it 100%.
And that was a 5th-day wicket also.
Exactly. And so, again, to go back to why we were talking about Joe Root, I think that's what gives Joe Root an edge over a lot of other players. Is he has the ability to do that, which is incredible, right? That he can change mid-career during his peak, but also that he is willing to play the team's way. We all respect Callis, and I still have Callis ranked ahead of Root at this stage in his career. Callis could not do that. He would not have been able to do that, right? Incredible single usage player, but we both know Callis just could not do that. Kane Williamson can't do that, right?
Yes, exactly.
So there are some things that I think move Root back up the list. But to get into that top 5, dude, are you talking about? Have you ever looked at Len Hutton's record? It is absolutely ridiculous.
Yes.
Like, this is a man who just went, I'm going to bat and I'll see you in a day and a half every single time he went out to bat, right? As an opener in England as well, right?
In those eras.
Oh, just ridiculous. Like, just absolute brilliant. And a world record maker himself, right? Who also lost most of his 20s to World War II, where he got injured and came back with a bent arm and still was the best player in the world. Come on.
Imagine. And to Root perspective only, I just wanted to add one more thing. Like, he has played all his cricket in Yorkshire, like Headingley, which is one of the most, I think, bounciest track in England, if I would put it that way, but still never managed to score that well in Australia. I don't think so. He has 100 in Australia yet. So is that also adding up to this kind of conversation that maybe even with having all those years of muscle memory of playing on the back foot on a relatively rising ball and still not being able to do well, and considering the fact that Ashes has such a huge, importance in English cricket, and still is not being able to score 100 even after so many trips down under? So was that also on your mind?
Weird. No. Mostly because Brian Lara didn't make many runs in India, right? So there are plenty of very great players who have a slight blip on their record, which is probably where Hutton and Hobbs and Bradman and Tendulkar go to a different level. And then you have other players who don't have any blips on their records, but they don't have the highs of some of these other players. So, you start to get... off the top of my head, we've never done this piece, but one day I'll do it. There's a lot of great West Indian batters who just never make runs in New Zealand, and I will never understand why this is the case, but it's quite funny. But I think Sobers and Viv Richards both struggled in New Zealand. But no, look, when you're looking at the top 5, if he was top 5 consideration, then yes, right? But if he's a back foot player who averages 50 in South Africa. Now, the interesting thing about his average in South Africa is it's still from only 100, right?
Yes.
So weirdly enough, in Australia and in South Africa, what he manages to do is lots of starts, but not a lot of finishes. So what's that? 22 test matches, 100 and 14 50s, right?
50s. A lot of 80s also in those 50s, I guess.
Yeah. And, so there'll be a lot of times where he's probably gone 70 and 80, right? In those knocks. Now, we know he has a bit of a conversion problem. Again, I'm not too worried about that because, I don't give a shit about hundreds all that much. But it does probably, if he gets 1 or 2 extra hundreds, if he gets 100 in Australia, that 36 average probably goes up to 40, 41, right? If it's a big 100, it might go up, might go well beyond that. I haven't watched him in Australia and thought that the problem with Australia has been the conditions. I've watched him in Australia and thought that the first time he went out, he was maybe a little bit too young. The third time and the fourth time he went out, I think the Australian wickets have changed quite a bit. He's also going up against an all-time bowling attack, right? And specifically, I think, and I don't know what his overall record is, but I think he has a real issue with how Pat Cummins bowls.
Yes.
Right. And I think in England, that Cummins doesn't quite get the pace off the pitch to bother him as much. I still think he bothers him, but he's specifically with that extra pace off the wicket. Root just can't handle that perfect ball that Cummins bowls to him. Right. And again, I'm not too worried about that because you go through some of the best players of all time, and sometimes they have those sorts of records where it's one player that gets them, more often than not. So no, I wouldn't worry about that too much. But that's the thing that most people will point to. It's probably the last thing that I would be overly concerned of with Joe Root.
And but like considering even I think the Cummins point is brilliant because I think he got him out 11 times, and even Hazelwood has also done the same, I guess. And in Australia, I've seen him like challenging both of his edges. Even the ball coming back has troubled him. The ball, that perfect ball that you mentioned, that Cummins bowls, which straightens off the pitch, and then the outside edge comes into picture. All those things, and even a certain times I've seen. I think in 2018, Ashes, if I remember correctly, Cummins was able to set him up beautifully for LBWs also. Like. And it was as if he just knew that this is going to happen on this particular ball. It became so predictable at one point of time, and he was doing it so beautifully. I totally agree with that because I think one thing that we underestimate is that we are actually seeing one of the best bowling attacks of maybe all time in Australian, not even in Australian history. I think even in the international context also, what we are seeing with the current Australian team, people tend to underestimate this fact that these three fast bowlers combined with Lyon, I think they would qualify as one of the best all-time attacks in the history of the game. I think you, as a historian, can give more insights on that because I just have a very limited perspective on it. But I think even with the numbers, the impact that they've been able to do, only one thing that has been missing on their resume is a BGT win in India, maybe, I guess. Apart from that, I think they've almost tick-marked everything. So
yeah, and if they played this current India team, they probably would they just happen to go up against an all-time India side over there, right? So if they'd done that, and to be fair, they probably overperformed in India on some of those tours anyway.
Yes, 2016-17, they should have even won that tour also. They were very close. In Bengaluru also, they had a massive chance.
Exactly. So, and I think so. He's gone up against that. Also, to go back to the Karun Nair point, does he look like he bats terribly in Australia? No. Right? So that's what I'm looking for. I've covered at least 2 of those in person, maybe 3 of those. I don't know. I don't think I went on the last one, but I think I went on the couple before that. Maybe I didn't go on the last 2. I've certainly been on many of his Ashes tours before. I haven't sat there going, he's not going to make runs here. Right? And that's what you're looking for. Yeah, like Ricky Ponting in India looked terrible, right?
Yes.
And so we're going to match up how he looked with the overall record. And in this case with Root, I think we can be like, do you know what? And there's a couple of players like this. Like it's a bit like what I said before about the West Indians in New Zealand. If a West Indian struggles in New Zealand, right? I don't go, that's a big blight on his mark. I go back and I look at his record in England. Straight away. That's the first thing I'm going to look for. Right? And I'll be like, we made heaps of runs in England. Maybe it was just one of those things. Maybe he got caught with Richard Hadley a couple of times. Maybe they were, bright green wickets when they turned up. I don't know. Whatever that may be. But I'm not too worried about it. The same is, if a player has a great record, in Asia. So Andy Flower, I think I'll get this right. Andy Flower has a great record in Pakistan and India, but not as good in Sri Lanka.
Yes.
Right. Does that mean he can't play spin? No, of course not. He absolutely tore India and Pakistan apart. But he had to face Murali in Sri Lanka, and maybe he wasn't as good against Murali. And so Murali on those wickets brought him back to earth a little bit, right? So you're always looking for that. And we have seen Joe Root and everything else. The one thing I would say, though, is he is a back foot player, and I don't think he's afraid of short pitch bowling. But he grew up in Yorkshire. He actually grew up on a pitch that spun. So one of the reasons that Joe Root is so good is because there's two reasons. One is Moin Khan's brother. Is it Bazid Khan?
Naseem Khan is also one of his brothers' name is Naseem Khan or something like that. Also,
Was
like,
he played Test cricket as well?
yes, he was
Yeah.
involved in that famous run out of Sachin Tendulkar in Calcutta, like where
So
Shoaib Akhtar came in his way. So throw came from Moin Khan's brother only.
yeah, so he was Joe Root's coach. So he was coached by a Pakistani player on a wicket that spun. So it probably makes more sense that he's better on spinning wickets than perhaps he is on faster wickets, all things considered, if you're an England player with that sort of background. But as I said, I think it's probably just an anomaly that he hasn't gone on and made 100. And if he'd made maybe 1 or 200s, he probably averages 40, 41, as I said before. And we just look at it differently then, right? Whereas actually, it wouldn't be all that much different. You know,
I think the Andy Flower thing also that you mentioned. I clearly remember in 2000 when I left professional cricket in 2000 only because of the match fixing era. Because my mother was an ardent cricket follower, and like after that 2000 match fixing thing, he kind of discouraged me like not to continue with cricket anymore. So I was about to play for under 16 state level match, and then I had to completely shut it off for my education and stuff. I clearly remember in that era that Andy Flower kind of threatened the entire Indian setup so badly that Saurabh had to literally fight with the selectors to get back Harbhajan into the team. And
yeah,
and I saw Harbhajan ball in Patiala. Like I used to play in Patiala, Dhruv Pandav Stadium. I saw him bowling in some of the club matches also there. And he was looking so dejected because he was not even sure that he'll ever be able to make a comeback ever again into the national team. But because Andy Flower tore apart Indian spinners so badly that Ganguly knew that if they wanted to have any chance in that 2001 BGT, they wanted him back. So the Andy Flower impact kind of rubbed off, and due to that, Australia had to suffer because otherwise there would never been any comeback of Harbhajan happening because he had fallen so. I would say the entire camaraderie with the selectors was pretty bad at that moment for him. So
yeah.
because all
So
the Indian spinners were taken to a task by him so badly, and you have pretty right with that because somebody was so massively good could not perform in Sri Lanka can be just one of the anomalies, cannot be a logical reason to it.
so that's that's what the book is kind of about. Like it's kind of looking through that and allowing people, like you said something about Gordon Greenwich before, which is really important. And the Gordon Greenwich point is the Virat Kohli point, right? If you only lived through the last 5 years of Gordon Greenwich's career or Virat Kohli's career, you would be like, what on earth is everyone talking about? This guy played on too long. He wasn't great, blah, 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 blah. What are we doing here? If you saw Gordon Greenwich or Virat Kohli in their peak, right, you saw one of the greatest batters of all time. And so there are Javed Miandad, Ricky Ponting, Hashim Amla. These are just the ones off the top of my head, right? Players who just play on a little bit too long, right? And then you can be lucky and you can play on a little bit too long and it doesn't affect your batting average that much, right? And there can be players like Sachin and Ponting that played on a little bit too long and did actually affect. But,
Yes.
If Ponting had retired when he should have, he probably would have averaged 55, 56, right? Now, in my book, I don't, and I mean quite literally in my book in this case, that doesn't matter to me, right? But to the general wider public, it does, right? And he's going to end up averaging low 50s. There's a lot of guys in his era that averaged low 50s, right? Mohammad Yusuf averaged low 50s. It's like, yep, they were not the same level of batter, right? And so that is, again, what you have to look beyond the very obvious when you are looking at at the players of this level and exactly, what you're looking for.
But like, if Sachin would have retired on that final night in 2011 with 175 test matches, 57 average, with 99 hundreds, what do you think the legacy would have become even bigger? Like, because I think the last 2.5 years that he played post that, he was pretty much a shadow of himself. Because I think his test average dropped from 57 to even below 54, and even in ODIs also he was not able to make an impact. So
Mm.
if on that final night he would have said goodbye to cricket, so do you think so his legacy would have impact? Because now I'm able to, for the first time, I'm able to kind of get an answer to this question, because I've been a big Sachin fan all these years, through
Mm.
your book and through you only, that it would not have even mattered, because this is the way I think you have put it up. That
Yeah. To me, it doesn't matter to his legacy. It probably changes a little bit of how I would have constructed his case, because that will, how many years would that have been then? 22 instead of
22,
24?
22.
I mean, it's still probably the best, longest career of all time. So it's not going to change his case all that much. But I don't think it would have changed my case on him all that much. And part of the reason is, do you know what he averaged in those last couple of years? My guess is, was it 35, 40?
Even less than that. It's 30
Oh, was
something.
it? Oh, okay.
Because he was because when he ended the
Then if
South
that is the
African tour,
case, then if that was the case, then that probably, then the way I would look at this is I would chop those years off. And I don't mean that we still have his total average, so they're not chopped off, right? But I would be like, what? So one of the things that we did, and this is where Sachin shone in the way that we looked at it, is how many good years did you have? So how many years did you average over 40? And how many great years did you have? How many years did you average over 50? Right? You take those 2 last years off, that doesn't actually change that case all that much, right? So the overall average is important, but overall average also might be the era that you're in and everything else. So we're looking at, the match factor, and we're looking at era factor, and we're looking at, median entry point for some players, and looking, do they have a hard roll? Do they have an easy roll? Where did they make their runs? Who were the best teams when they were playing? All these sorts of things, right? On and on and on. Those last 2 years don't really matter all that much. And I would say that in some, if you look at Martin Crowe, I wasn't that interested in the first 2 years, right? Martin Crowe, if he was playing for a good test team, would not have been playing in the team at 19 and 20, right? He would have waited till he was 21 or 22. But they didn't have a choice because they didn't have anyone else. So Martin Crowe has to come into the team. So I'm willing to go, yeah. But Martin Crowe, although also at the other end, has a bad year at the end where his knees are gone. If Martin Crowe's body doesn't fall apart, we know that he probably would have played into the 90s and would have averaged probably mid 40s forever, because he was such a genius, right? And he would have been a great player in his 30s, because not only did he have the hand-eye coordination and the skill, he had the creativity and he had the technique, right? Yes. He might have been better. Some of this would depend on his personality, and I knew Marty quite well.
So did you meet him in person, or?
Yeah, we worked together. Yeah, it was a real shame that I hadn't thought of this book while he was still alive, because if I'd thought of this book while he was still alive, I think he would have actually tried to write it with me.
Yeah, because to be honest, like
kind of guy,
considering that his knowledge of the game, his predictions, his everything that he was able to bring on table, and the creativity that you mentioned, because I saw this interview of Wasim Akram, and he said that he rates him the toughest that he's ever bowled to. Yep. Because always, we all know that how he deconstructed that reverse swing. In 90.
Which was what?
Conscious over subconscious.
Yeah. Yes. So with someone like Martin Crowe, who he could barely move into his 30s because of his knee issues, but he sometimes would play games against top level players, and they would bowl at full speed against him, and he would still make runs against them. Like, he just couldn't run between the wickets. That was his biggest issue by that stage. The rest of his body hadn't really gone. So you look at his career and you're like, well, at the end of his career, I can't really worry about all that much because his body collapsed and he was still quite young. At the start of his career, he was obviously thrown in too early. So what are we looking for with Martin Crowe? So Martin Crowe then becomes a peak batter, right? And he has this incredible peak in the late 80s, where no one is making runs like Martin Crowe is, right? Me and Dad has already started to slow down a little bit. Viv Richards is coming to the end. And Martin Crowe just blitzes everyone in that late 80s, right? But it's a short career. So I have to look at it from that perspective, right? I'm not going to say, I mean, it would be unfair to Martin Crowe to take the first 2 years of the last year of his career too seriously, because there are extenuating circumstances that he didn't have. It's the same with Sachin and Virat, right? we can, and Ponting and Amla, whoever, we can say all those guys played on too long, right? No doubt. But it's very hard to drop a champion player. And also, was Ponting replaced by someone who was better?
No, I don't think so.
Right?
Not at all. Not yet.
So was Sachin replaced by someone better? Eventually, but not straight away.
Not straight away. Yes.
Hashim Amla, was he replaced by someone better? Not really. Right? And so they get to play on longer because there isn't someone who's about to kick. There isn't 6 or 7 great batters who are going to kick them out of their sides. And also, they probably bring other things to the team at that point. So maybe Sachin has a 21-year career, right? Or as I said before, I think I'm right in saying this. He played for 24 years, and I have him as a plus player in 18 years. Right?
Yeah.
You show me another player with 18 plus years, right? And they can go above Sachin. And there's one, his name's Don Bradman, and he is above Sachin, right? So that is what we are talking about there. That is what I am looking for. And and to get into that top 5, I think you have to play for a very long time, or you have to be like Steve Smith and average 65 to 70 for like 8 or 9 years, right?
8 or 9 years.
Or you have to be like Brian Lara, where there are external things that show that you are at a different level. Other than that, it's really hard to get into the top 5. Like Gavaskar Sobers is not in my top 5, right? And people are very angry about that as well. The old heads. And I was like, I love Gavaskar Sobers, and I know he could have batted at number 3, and so I'm willing to give him a boost. But he did bat behind Conrad Hunt, Rowan Kenai, Clyde Walcott, Frank Worrell. I'm missing one, Everton Weeks, right? Quite often he was behind all of those guys. Every one of those guys is a West Indian great or an all-time great, right? Conrad Hunt's the only one who's probably not quite an all-time great, and he's pretty good too, right? Well, okay. Well, if I'm Sobers, I think that's a pretty big advantage for me over Andy Flower, who's batting behind Alistair Campbell and Grant Flower, right? Like, you have to take all of those things in. And if you look at it, someone said this to me recently, it's really fascinating. Smith bats behind Warner, and you can throw Khawaja up there, right? Cook bats ahead of Root for a long period of his time. Sachin had Sehwag and Dravid ahead of him.
Yes.
Many of the greatest batters ever do actually have quite a cushy entry point, right? So when Steve Waugh, we all remember Steve Waugh from the 90s. He got Australia out of trouble and all this. The median score that Steve Waugh came to the crease was like 126 for 3.
Yes.
Right? That's a hell of a cushion. Yeah. What a cushion that is. Like, do you know what Andy Flower would Andy Flower would sacrifice his left limb, right? Either of them, arm and leg, to come in with the score at 120 for 3. Right?
He was at 70 for 3, I guess, in your video.
His was like 63 or 65, and I think Rishabh Pant's is about 70, isn't it? 69 or 70. So you have to factor all those things in, and it's laborious, but it's worth it. So I'm not going to sit there and go, the last 2 years. Actually, Virat Kohli as well. Virat Kohli's overall average has come down. So yeah, when you find another player who had a 7-year peak like Virat Kohli, right? Then you can argue. Then you can have a conversation, right? And, Virat Kohli and Javed Miandad, they're almost identical in my book. They're not far from each other. I think they're in the same tier as each other, right? Javed Miandad ends up with an average over 50, but it almost dropped under 50 right at the end. Javed Miandad, genius. Love him. Changed the game forever. Will always stand that man. But I'm pretty sure he played on a lot flatter wickets than Virat Kohli did in Pakistan.
Yes.
Right? You have to factor those things in.
And with nobody troubling him with reverse swing also, because nobody knew about it at that time.
Yeah, exactly. He was the one guy who didn't have to worry about it in that era, right?
Yes. And a couple of more questions, like a lot of people were also asking, like been pinning me that I should ask you also. Like, first thing that came to everyone's mind during the series is like why English cricket doesn't talk that much about Jamie Smith, considering that they talk a lot about Brook, but like why not about him? Like, can we put him in that category where he can also be that future star for England, or is this like flash in the pan for you?
I just think that, Harry Brook's been averaging about 55 or 60 for a couple of years, hasn't he? And Smith has only just sort of got to that level, hasn't he? So I think it's mostly just that. Like, you've got 2 of them coming through at the same time, and the other one was taking up all the airspace. I think by Edgbaston, that started to swing back towards Smith as well. We don't. I think also Brooks just a little bit more tested, and everyone feels a little like there are still issues with Brook. We still don't know how he's going to be consistently against top quality spin, right? I think that's
Yes.
probably still a big argument with him. Smith just hasn't been tested all that much yet, and we need to see a little bit more. They're pretty high on both of them, though, to be fair. But yeah, it just I think Brook has taken so much of that the airspace at the moment.
I totally agree on you. And also another question that everybody has been asking about the series in general. So, like, India could not defend to 370 in the first test match. And then while chasing, they could not even chase 190. So, is it the pitch or is it actually a very significant shift in the mindset when we talk about baseball and English cricket and we talk about India? Because we don't have a history of chasing big scores in India. Like, in
No.
totality, I think we have 15 such scores we've been able to chase more than 190 in our history of it. And the
Yeah.
peak,
Some
like,
of that has to be that chasing in India is hard, though.
yes, but
Like
even abroad also, like,
yeah, true. No, you're right. I just think the 180 was they lost too many wickets. I think honestly, if Washington pushes that ball a foot wider and Joffrey doesn't catch it, I think India win that test. I think it was all about the fact that it was falling apart that pitch, but you needed a hard ball to make it fall apart. And England just lost. They took too many wickets, and I think that India would have chased that with Washington. Right? I was still when India needed 80 runs and Bumrah was in, I was still like, this is still very doable, and everyone's looking at me like I'm mad. But I was like, this pitch is just about to. Once it dies, how do England get wickets? You tell me how England's going to get a wicket here, because Jasper's just going to pop on the front foot, which is what he did for about 40 minutes. The other game is probably the reverse of that, right? They didn't get early wickets at Headingley. If they had got early wickets at Headingley, that chase is very different, right?
very different.
Is it the once mindset? That ball went soft? No, some of it is just the ball and the pitches, right? I don't think it's about mindset so much. The one thing I would say is that this is a very experienced England side now, right? And it's not a very experienced Indian side, so it is a little bit younger. Basically, England keep throwing haymakers, and so that's a very uncomfortable lineup to go up against. You'd much rather go up against a team that is much more straightforward and plays things normally.
Like, if we add Stokes to that 2021 series, do you think so? Still, the scoreline would have been same, the 2-2 scoreline that we saw in that series. Like, considering like for the first 4 test matches were 2-1 in favor of India, and Stokes was not there in that series. So, is he also a very big factor in this English team? Something which India maybe is missing. Somebody who just because his style of leadership is that he would kind of gel everybody together and would say like, I am the one who's going to put my body on the line, and would want everybody else to also do that. Maybe. Do you think so? If that would have been a factor also in that 2021 series?
I mean, maybe, but you know, these things happen, don't they? You're going to have situations where you have injuries like that. He doesn't bat particularly well against India, so maybe he causes other issues, right, on the back end of that. So I mean, perhaps, but he probably wouldn't have been able to bowl, so he would have played as a batter and maybe not made any runs, right?
Yes, because as a bowler in Edgbaston 2018 also, I think he was the biggest impact, because out of nowhere he's able to produce those magic spells against India. So like I think that's quite a fair point, because in 2021 he might not have bowled. So that kind of thing takes away the major skill that he somehow manages to demonstrate in front of India, because his batting somehow has never clicked in front of India all these years. It's been quite a big sample size now. He's been playing against India since 2014, I guess. So 11 years is quite a big sample size. And Jadeja has troubled him even in England on a consistent basis. So I think, yes, I got the answer there, because his bowling has done more of the talking than his batting. And that's why we didn't see that impact of his in 2024 series when England came to India, because he was not able to bowl at all. The only one bowl that he bowled was like where he was able to get Rohit Sharma out in Dharamsala, that magic ball that he produced. Apart from that, he was not bowling. So I think I resonate with that. That's quite a good perspective. And certain times we tend to maybe give too much value to a certain player also. Like One last question, if we have a couple of minutes. Like,
Yeah.
do you think so? Like, Rohit and Virat would have scored in this series, the kind of pitches, the kind of bowling attacks we had, or like, is it like would have been a different
Yeah. No, I
scenario
think they would
altogether?
have. No, I think they would have. I think me or Harmy made the joke on one of our videos on Talk Sport that like they must have been looking at these wickets going, well, we could score on these, right? Like, we could score at Headingley or Edgbaston. These look like wickets we could definitely have scored on. Lords would have been a bit more of a challenge, but Lords was a challenge for everyone. But yeah, look, they have had one of the most cursed recent runs of anyone in Test cricket history. And to go back to the book and everything, when people say things like, "Oh, Virat didn't make any run," you show me another great player who had a change as drastic as what Virat Kohli had. He had the pace playing pandemic through the wobble ball. He had the Kookaburra reinforced seam, and then he had ragging pitches at home. I don't think I've ever seen another great player have to go through that many different things towards the end. And Rohit was doing it. Rohit was in better form, and he was struggling at times, right?
Yes.
So maybe Virat was just done. There is an argument that says that Virat is an athletic batter, that he needs his athletic skills to be at the top of the game for him to be effective. And he's probably no longer that athlete that he once was, right? He doesn't move as quickly as he once did, which is that's the Ricky Ponting argument, that they're not great technicians, but their athleticism was so incredible it didn't matter. Maybe that's just what Virat is, but I don't know. If I'm Virat, I reckon I'm looking at this going, yeah, I could have made runs on this.
But like, I had a discussion with a friend of mine. So he's played with Virat during his early years, like under 10 cricket. So tennis ball cricket, the club matches at that level. So he was sharing that Virat was the same back then also. So the 10-year-old Virat was exactly the same fire, same passion, and skill wise, little cut above the rest of the people. Like in
Yeah.
Delhi circles, when he was 11ish, my friend, so he played a lot of these tennis ball matches with Virat. So he said like the skill was pretty much there, but the hunger, the fighting spirit, and that ability to pick up a fight was still there. It was exactly the same what we saw at the
Yeah.
international level. So there was no difference to it at all. And I think you have put it really well, because in India also before 2013 we never saw these kind of rank turners, like the kind of pitches that we saw in last 10, 12 years.
Yeah.
Like pitches were still good for spin bowling, but they were not rank turners. Like in last 12 years we had one of the toughest Indian wickets also, and this is the
Mm.
reason why Indian batters also kind of get all the scrutiny that they're not able to play spin that well. They should go back to domestics. But people tend to underestimate the tracks that have been laid out for all these
Yeah.
test matches, and it's
And that's one of the things we're looking at in the book, right? That's why we're looking at these things. We've done this before. People outside of Australia don't remember Ponting really struggled at the end of his career, right? But he struggled on pitches that were still some of the easiest pitches that we've ever had in the history of the game.
yes.
So he's averaging 38 to 40, and everyone's like, he's fine. But his 38 to 40 was similar to Virat's 26 to 27 when you look at the games they were playing,
But
right?
like, I still want to understand one thing. Like the fourth innings chase, as you said, that maybe India couldn't get those wickets in heading B, and then it was the other way around in Lords. But this has been a repeat factor for them for quite a long time. Do you think so that certain players are able to kind of break the mold? They have certain template for these chases, because we know that Smith, for that matter, like Graham Smith, was
Mm.
exceptional at that. His fourth innings. I think he has 400s in fourth innings, if I'm not mistaken. And even I've read somewhere that even Yunus Khan also had a brilliant fourth innings record. So is it like certain batters are able to? You've mentioned that in the book also.
I say that I think he's the best fourth innings batter in the history of the game. Look, there are certain. Let's finish off here because it's really interesting. Do you remember at the start of the when we were talking about Sunil Gavaskar? Do you remember what I said about him in one-day cricket? I
Yes.
said, based on how he plays in Test cricket, it wouldn't surprise me if he was better in the second innings than the first innings, right? Now, we
Yes.
talked about some of the technical reasons. Him and Yunus Khan perfectly, and I'd throw Graham Smith in there as well. Graham Smith, weirdly, he played quite low, He didn't really like the extra bounce. He would quite often get his fingers broken, whatever. Day
Yes.
4 and day 5, that doesn't happen as much, right? So there are technical reasons why these guys are great. And Yunus Khan and Sunil Gavaskar, two of the greatest players of spin that's ever existed, right? Sunil Gavaskar, 55 ODIs batting in the first innings, averaged 24. 53 ODIs in the second innings, averaged 48.
48. His career average is 30 something, I guess.
So that tells you that there is a that isn't about, there's not more spin in the second innings of an ODI. There's a little bit, but not enough to make any difference, right? That tells you that some of this is mindset, right? And you can, England currently has a team that loves chasing. No one else really does in the world, right? That's not a normal thing. But England has a team that does this. And you know, I played in a team at one stage where we just had a bunch of guys who loved chasing. Like, I much prefer to go back to my shit batting again. I much prefer to bat in the second innings because I know what I have to do. In the first innings, there's too many options. I could hit this ball anywhere. I could do, oh, no, I'm out, right? Every time I'm out. In the second innings, I'm like, we're chasing 140. This wicket is rolling along the ground. Great. I'm going to play to that situation for as long as I can. Right? Or I come in and we need 10 runs and over. Not a problem. Everyone else is crapping themselves on the boundary. And I'm like, no, I'll just come in and swing. Edge over slips. Lofted cover drive for 6. Slog over the leg side for 6. Inside edge, back past leg stump. Suddenly I'm scoring at 10 runs and over. Right? And now the whole team thinks they can believe. That's because I know what I have to do. If you sent me out in the first innings to belt like that, I would probably have hit the second one straight up in the air. Right? And so there are players that have that, and maybe India at the moment or over the last 10 or 15 years just haven't had those players in that situation. Maybe it's dumb luck. There actually aren't that many fourth innings chasers, right? We over indent on these because, you know, of the way that we follow cricket, but maybe there just aren't that many. And as I said before, there's a reason why India probably doesn't have as many as other sides, is that the vast majority of their chases, because the vast majority of their wins have been in India. And chasing in the fourth innings in India, if the wicket is broken up, 180 is 400.
It's 400. Yes, totally agree.
So maybe they've had what was the one against Pakistan that we were talking about before? Sunil Gavaskar. What were they chasing that day? About 220, 230?
Yeah, I think around that only. I think India got bundled out for 190 something.
I saw the South Africa chase of 400 live, right? And I've
in the ground itself.
No, not on TV.
Okay.
And I saw but I have seen that. I saw the what have I seen? The Headingley, the two big chases at Headingley, the West Indies one and the England one. I was there. I wasn't there for the most recent one, but I've been to a couple of the others, right? 2 or 3 of those big chases. And I've watched as much footage as there is available of Sunil Gavaskar playing against Pakistan in that test match. Chasing 220, 230 in that test match was harder than chasing 400 or 350 or 300 in some of those other ones. It's not even comparable, right? So if they got over the line there, everyone would be like, oh, now they've only done 6 times over 180, right? But that one's worth 450 in my book. Because if Gavaskar had got him over the line there, no one else in the history of the game outside of Bradman might have been able to get them over the line in that chase, right? But it's lower. And that comes back to the whole thing we've been talking about, right? Of like whatever era, whatever pitches, whatever. That innings is about as good as I've seen anyone play spin on a pitch where you shouldn't be able to face a ball, right?
And I think even that chase of 438 in England, where they Gavaskar scored a double 100 in 4th innings, and India was like at the end of the chase, they were like 429 for 7. They were just like in the striking distance of reaching the world record like way back in 1979, I guess. I don't remember it was in Oval or Headingley. I don't remember the venue, but India also...
Oval, I think, wasn't it?
Oval, I guess. Oval it was. 429 for 7 India scored. So even in that also he scored a double 100. He scored 221, I guess, in that innings. So
I think when you start to look at that, what that tells you then is that a chase of like both of those are absolutely incredible situations, right? Where they don't go down as successes.
I totally agree with you. And
yet they are. Like, as I said, it's on YouTube, everyone. I tell everyone to do this. I can't remember. I can't remember where the test was, but it's
I
India,
think it was in
Pakistan,
Bengaluru.
Bengaluru. You're right. It was
Yes.
Bengaluru. 1987. You'll find it on YouTube. Watch what the ball is doing. No modern player would be able to actually stay out there for as long as Gavaskar did, right? And that's
Yeah.
not having a go at, it's like, oh, modern players aren't as good. It's just like, just no player, right? I'm not sure Bradman would have been able to handle what Gavaskar handled in that innings. The ball is literally bouncing vertical up at him off a length from spinners for hours.
For
The
hours,
wicketkeeper
yes.
can't even stop any of them. He's like getting hit on the body and everything. It was remarkable. And so how many times has India done? Maybe they've chased 170, but that 170 might be 360, 380 if it was on another wicket.
Yes, India total has like 15 chases of 190 plus. I recorded all of them because I was doing a podcast on it. So first one happened in 1968 in Dunedin, New Zealand. So India had to chase 200 there. I think Ajit Wadekar scored 70. Rusi Surti scored 30 something. Then that famous Port of Spain 403 chase where
Yeah.
Gavaskar scored a beautiful 100 and Mundappa Vishwanath also scored 100. And after that,
Changes cricket forever.
yeah, changes cricket forever because like the West Indies became the beast
Yep.
of cricket post that. Then there was this tight test match in 1986 against Australia where they had to chase like 347. Then there was one chase in Brabon in 1964 where Pataudi and Vijay Manjrekar kind of scored a 90 plus partnership. And
Can I give you
apart from
another
that,
one? I reckon there's a great chase they have in Australia during the World Series cricket. The first test match in World Series cricket is
yes,
happening on the same day.
1979, 78. It was 340 something India scored, and they just missed it by a whisker. I think 30, 40
Yeah.
runs only. But
Yeah,
that
they were
time,
on
like,
their way to winning that at one stage
yes,
as well.
but
So
then like peak
yeah.
Australian team was not playing, right? So majority
No,
of
no, no. But Tomo was still playing, and was Rodney Hogg in that lineup as well? Like
yes,
that
yes,
was a good
yes,
chase. I mean,
yes.
that was a good chase no matter who you go up against. Again, you're scoring over 300 on a wicket where that generally doesn't happen
I think
towards the end
3-2
of
was the
the.
scoreline in that series, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, it was a really close series. It was a
Yes,
fascinating series actually.
and even
So
in
again, as I said, that so you so there's a lot of people who are upset that Sunil Gavaskar is so high in my list, right? And basically, what I said, if you can find a better player of spin than Sunil Gavaskar, you can have him above him in my list, right? But you can't because Sunil Gavaskar might be the greatest player of spin of all time. And so he's ahead of Viv Richards in my list. And people are like, oh, but Viv Richards is the best player of top end pace. Yeah, but 50% of the deliveries in Test cricket are delivered by spinners, and about 5% are delivered by express pace.
express
Right?
pace, yes.
So there is a bias against it. And I think when we think about chases, we quite often think about, teams chase very well against Australia, right? That's because Australian wickets don't always break up.
Yes. Even India's out of these 15 chases, 5 are against Australia only. And pretty surprisingly, because even in India also, like 2010 series, where they managed to score 216, that famous partnership between Ishan Sharma and VVS Lakshman. And I saw a pattern also, like from 2000 to 2012, in those 12 years, India had 9 such chases of 190 plus. And in all those chases, either Sachin or VVS stood up. Like
Yep.
in one of them, obviously, even Ganguly and Dravid also, like in a couple of them, but they had a consistent pattern. Like where number 4 and number 5, or maybe number 6, were consistently bailing you out from tricky positions. Something which I think the current team could not replicate because in 2001, 2003, we won in Adelaide. Then 2007, we won in Delhi against Pakistan. There, Sachin scored a beautiful 50, where he got fractured ribs also from Shoaib Akhtar. That famous story that Ganguly shares that he fractured his ribs during that innings and he didn't even get to know that. And he was playing through pain. In 2010, then we chased in Sri Lanka, that beautiful 100 from VVS. Then 2 back-to-back chases against Australia in BGD in 2010. A lot of such innings were there. A pretty good pattern was there and suddenly went missing after that legendary batting kind of disappeared. And you have a very valid point because all these players had Sehwag, Dravid, that comfort there because we never saw collapses during these chases. Like they never were in a situation where they were 30 for 3 or maybe 60 for 4. Hardly any such situation. So that I think apart from that Mohali victory where they won by just one single wicket, I don't think so there was any collapses. And very, very valid point, because you had Sehwag and you had Rahul Dravid to base, and even Ganguly also for significant period of time, to give that solid cushion to Sachin Tendulkar and VVS Lakshman. So this point, I think, has been missing, because somehow India has struggled for that solidity in batting for the last 12 years, because like the batters have peaked, but the unison hasn't been there.
Yeah, hasn't been the same. No, I agree. I think you're about to run out of your recording time. We've spoken too much. Thank you very much for having me on the podcast. And look, if you liked our chat, the book is available.
Yes.
I think it's about 600 rupees for the soft cover one. You can, if you want to get the digital version or the audio book, as Deepak has, you can do that.
Yeah,
Thank you very much for having me on the show.
That's not even a cost of a pizza, to be honest. That's not like you would not even get a coffee at Starbucks for this. So it's worth an investment.
And I'll say this: my aim is to sell enough copies that one day my book is going to be sold on street corners with next to like Ayn Rand's books. You know, all those street corners where they have like Mein Kampf and Ayn Rand and all that. That's my goal, everyone. So every book that you sell means we are closer to someone copying my book and selling it on a street corner. So one day I can go for a walk in India and I can pay a guy a couple of rupees to buy a stolen copy of my copyrighted copy of my book. That's the aim. So please help me.
I think everybody should read the reviews also. Some beautifully written reviews. People have put in their heart and soul in writing those reviews also. I'm very sure must have seen all of them. So it's quite a remarkable thing that your work is appreciated so well. So really, give a shout out
to a project like this, and you don't know if everyone's going to be upset that Steve Waugh's too low or Virat Kohli's too high and whatever. And to see the reviews and not just reviews on Amazon and Goodreads, but also the reviews from actual reviewers. Yeah, you put your heart and soul into something, and you hope that it works. And in this case, it has.
Yes, seriously. And the price, I think, for such a gem is way too low, because like we all know that in India things are costing a lot more now. So like it's not even $8 if we put it in that sense. So I think it's worth a shout. I'll make sure that whenever we connect next, I should have it in my bookshelf.
Well, if you want to spend more, you can. The hard copy is a little bit more expensive. I think the problem with people these days is they don't buy 10 copies of my book. Buying one copy is great, but if you can have a copy for every bit of your house, then you can always pick it up.
Yes, but hard copy is always the best thing, because then there's a very good chance that the kids would also pick it up and they would maybe read a chapter or two, and that would change their entire perspective about the game. So I always try to.
I should say, just so that everyone knows, it's not a coaching manual, but a lot of kids have started reading it and really enjoying it as well. Yeah, but it's not like a coaching manual at all. I'm sure you could learn things, but I don't expect anyone to become a better batter by having read this book, because I certainly haven't become a better one by writing.
Dimension added to your cricket knowledge also, and your way of looking at the game changes. Because my last conversation with you kind of changed the way I saw the series. Completely different, because otherwise, like, I would have switched off my TV at 81 for 7. But because of all the discussions that we had, I was able to look at that pitch in a different way. I was able to look at the bowling attacks in a different way, context into a different way. So I was still able to invest my energy into those last 2 sessions. Otherwise, it would not have happened. So my whole perspective about the game, the reading, everything has changed post our conversation. So I'm very sure people are going to get that perspective from your book.
I hope so. Well, thank you very much, and I'll chat to you next time.
Looking forward to that, and thanks a lot for giving so much time to me again.
No worries. Have a good one.
Thank you. Thanks a lot.